Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. This is Chris. I'm here with Justin, and we have a special guest, Mr. John Yelland of Judicator. We talked about their album from 2015, At the Expense of Humanity, on our last episode. It was a request, and I speak for both myself and Justin in saying that we were very pleased that that was a request, because it was something that gave us reason to sit down and really kind of dig into this album that neither one of us were super familiar with, and we both ended up really enjoying it. So with that, John, welcome to the Metal Exchange, and thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. I'm really happy to be here, and I think this is going to be a really interesting conversation.
I'm thrilled to be speaking to somebody whose time difference is only within 2 or 3 hours rather than like 6 or 7 or 8, has been the case with some of our European friends. So, are you in Arizona?
No, I'm in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Oh, okay. Got it. Justin, go ahead. You were going to say something.
Yeah, I just, it's funny. Some of these interviews have gone on in really odd hours for somebody, whether it was very, very early in the morning over there or the middle of a work day. Don't tell anyone over here, whatever the case may be. But it is a real pleasure. And before we kind of dive deep into the album, why don't you talk a little bit about kind of the making of the band and how this all came together? Because it was all new to us until we really dove in this week for different reasons. But it was just an absolute pleasure to really dive deep into this album. But I want to go back even before At the Expense and really kind of get into the formation of the band.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say it was somewhat serendipitous, just because the band was founded by Alicia Cordisco and myself, and the roots of the band go back to when we met in 2010 at a Blind Guardian concert in Tempe, Arizona, I believe it was. Her and I met outside waiting for the band, I guess. I didn't really know what I was doing. I just kind of came down super early. I just had nothing else to do. I figure I'll just wait outside of the venue. Maybe I'll catch a glimpse of the band loading up or going to or from the venue or something. I don't know. But I ended up meeting Alicia Cordisco because she showed up around like 3:00 or something, really, really early too. And we just ended up hanging out, talking, whatnot, and we just exchanged information. And we Alicia Cordisco has a long-running relationship with Seven Kingdoms, another power metal band. And they were on tour with Blind Guardian at the time. And so we were actually invited by them to come back and watch the Blind Guardian sound check. And we got kicked out.
Yes.
Once they found out we didn't have a backstage pass or anything, they were like, "You have to go." And I was like, Bye, Blind Guardian. Hopefully I'll see you again someday. And as fate would have it, we ended up doing just that. I ended up developing my own sort of, I guess friendship would be accurate. Not like we're best buddies, but I would say that I'm friends with Hansi Kirsch and especially the drummer Frederick. But yeah, anyway, so Alicia and I exchanged information. We were Facebook friends for a couple years, and then she had this material, this album that she was kind of just sitting on, and I forget how it happened, but she just asked me if I would be interested in doing an album with her. And so we created this little project called Judicator. And the album, we had no expectations when we put it out. But when we did put it out, it was pretty well received, to such an extent that we decided, hey, maybe we should do another one. So the very next year, I think it was, we put out Sleepy Plesso. And that gained enough interest that we figured maybe we should just turn this into an actual full-fledged band. And that's when Jordan Elsess came in as drummer. He and Alicia have a very long relationship as well. They had been together since high school, maybe junior high, if I remember right, but years in any case. And so the band's been trucking along ever since.
Nice. I have to ask, were you singing either professional or semi-professionally before that, or was it something that kind of just started as a fan and just realized I have an amazing voice to go along with your fandom?
I will say that while I have natural artistic inclinations, I don't think of myself as one of those people who is just blessed with a good voice. So I don't know. I mean, any good vocals I have, I think, are just attributed to either hard work or just a refusal to stop.
Sometimes that's the best combination, right? It's a little bit of both, maybe.
I mean, I know I'm not the most talented vocalist out there, but I'll be damned if I'm not one of the ones who I'm never going to stop. I've had a taste of what this is like to express yourself and explore yourself and the world through music. And so whether I'm doing it in a metal band or just any artistic way, like I can't live without it. It's like an organ in my body. Sounds really pretentious and like artsy fartsy, but I've had stretches where I'm not doing anything creative or expressive, and it feels like it feels like my soul is becoming like flabby or something. Like I'm not exercising that muscle in the body. You know what I'm saying?
I totally get it. Was this your first band per se, or did you have other projects before this?
Yeah, I started in a little band called Shadow Seer, and that was fine. There's some good stuff in there, you know, as good as an 18, 19-year-old can produce with no experience in production or anything like that. So you can find those songs online. They're fine. But then I went on to join Dysphoria, and that is where I started getting my footing a little bit better. I think you can tell I started growing as a vocalist more than I took on actual vocal instruction. And then I eventually started Judicator with Alicia, and that project became my main band.
Did you find that your vocal stylings, to me, my first thought is he sounds kind of like Hansi. Was that something that you found that you sounded like, or was that something that you tried to emulate? Was it a little bit of both? I don't want to say that it's like a copycat. It just sounds like it's a more of like inspired by, how did that voice kind of come to be? Like, was it I sound like Hansi, or I want to sound like Hansi?
I'm kind of glad that you're phrasing this the way that you are, because that tells me that I have been successful in what I've been trying to do. I started out as essentially a Bruce Dickinson clone as I was learning how to sing. And then when I really started getting into being a singer myself, like for a band, falling in love with Blind Guardian, I became a Hansi Kirsch clone. I wasn't doing a very good job at it, but I was trying. So I think, you know, it's the process that every musician goes through. Imitation is the highest form of flattery, they say. And so I started out doing a lot of imitating. And as I became better at my own craft, my own art, I wanted to find my own voice. I wanted to not be a Bruce Dickinson or Hansi Kirsch clone. Now, I'll say there are things that Hansi Kirsch does and that Bruce Dickinson does, more so Hansi Kirsch, that are just tools in the tool belt, so to speak, that really resonate with me and that I just really like. That sort of distorted kind of friction thing that Hansi Kirsch does with his voice. That's just something I really like to do. And so, yeah, I mean, I think there's always going to be a comparison between Hansi Kirsch and I. But I think it's helped by the fact that I like his voice and mine just don't sound similar. We have different timbres, different tones. My voice is a little bit nasally or something, and his is more deep and baritone. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I listened to somebody like Jens Carlson, who obviously was with Savage Circus or Persuader, and it's not that, right? It's not, I don't want to use the word clone, but there is a real similarity there. Whereas with you two, it's more of you can hear elements. Certainly it resonates, especially in certain phrases and certain songs, but at the same time, it's not throughout the entire course of the album. So I want to draw that distinction because I think it's apt.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that does my heart good too, because I'm a big fan of Savage Circus and Persuader. But yeah, I definitely see what you're saying.
yeah, for sure.
Beyond the go ahead, Justin.
No, please go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say beyond the vocal style. What were some of your like early inspirations as far as music goes? Just as far as like the overall sound of the music. I mean, there's definitely like we found that there were things that were akin to Blind Guardian or even Demons and Wizards at certain points, but it's definitely not like, again, not like you're trying to be one of these bands. It's just clear that they've inspired you, but clearly there's other inspirations as well. Like who were some of those kind of growing up that other bands that really just were big for you, big influences?
Yeah, so Alicia left the band in 2020. And so this new album that we have produced, which has not yet been released, is totally new territory. So I have, up until this point, had no involvement or very, very minute involvement in the actual music side of the band. Rather, I've been basically in control of the lyrics, a heavy hand with the concept, and sometimes the track listing. So, I mean, I can answer the question, but it doesn't really pertain to Judicator in terms of the music. As far as bands and artists who have really shaped me over the years, I would say definitely Iron Maiden, definitely Blind Guardian, Gamma Ray, Halloween. But also one of the bigger ones has been David Bowie. His more experimental work with like the album called Outside is like, I mean, that album alone is my favorite. It's like my favorite David Bowie album. It's one of my favorite albums, period. And what really resonated with me in that album, it was the first album that I had heard that was like that. And it really opened up my mind to avant-garde attitude and avant-garde music. So, I got introduced to Sleepy Time Gorilla Museum, which you maybe have never heard of, but
I'm actually familiar with them, and that is about as avant-garde as it gets, in my opinion. And it's every time you listen, it's a trip. It really is just out there. But there's stuff that I love power metal. Don't get me wrong. I mean, you just named a half dozen of my favorite bands, but at the same time, I think I really have resonated over the years, or kind of gone with the prog side of things. So I love prog rock and I love prog metal and all that stuff. I mean, amongst other things. But the reason, you bring up a band like Sleepy Time Gorilla Museum, that is like the proggiest of the prog, right? It's just all over the place. But there's something endearing about it because it's just, you have to expect the unexpected. So I'm glad you brought them up.
Yeah, I mean, it brings you into a really unique headspace. And I think that's something that I really like about music, is that it can, if not bring you into a unique headspace, it can amplify the headspace. And I've played around with this. Like, literally when I have free time, sometimes I'll go for a walk when it's rainy, and I'll play the kind of music that goes well with raininess, or I'll put on candles with the lights off and I'll listen to Triptychon, and it just fits. So yeah, I mean, that kind of orientation toward music being experiential, being something that can help amplify or explore moods. It's cathartic. It helps you to release whatever you're going through. That all kind of started really with David Bowie's album Outside. And then just to top it off, music that really resonates with me as well is especially stuff like Motown and jazz. And I think Alicia leaving the band was in some ways a crippling blow that has required a lot of effort for us to step out of and reorient ourselves. But I can't deny that it has also presented some fun opportunities, namely being a little bit more involved with the music side of things. And the only reason I bring that up is because I brought up Motown and jazz. So this next Judicator album is going to have some elements of jazz, or maybe not jazz, but maybe big band, or I don't know. I feel like we're injecting some elements into Judicator now that you wouldn't have heard previously. And, I will see this next album as a very interesting process to watch, because I think most of our fans are going to be totally fine with it, and they're going to be like, oh, this is a new direction. But I'll be very curious to see if there is any negative reaction. Because, when Alicia left the band, we lost like 99% of like our music creating capabilities or whatever, So, we had the conversation. Do we try to continue on writing music that is like what she had been writing up until this point? Well, if we do that, we're like, it could come up. Not only would it be inauthentic and just aping her style, her trademark playing stuff, but I think people would see through it as well. And so, for better or for worse, I think the only option was to be authentic. And so, I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm making a mountain out of a molehill. Maybe nobody will really care. But yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, because we're definitely not doing the sort of speed metal stuff that we have played with in the past. It's going more in that avant-garde, more in that progressive direction than I think we've ever gone before. And I'm not saying that we're going to go that way forever, but I think this was a really fun experience to take a big step in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, you can hear the evolution from album to album, and I'm saying this as a new fan, right? Because admittedly, this was my first exposure, and then I just kind of went all in right after at the expense, and I heard the evolution, from album to album. So I think this will be a real gigantic step. But I guess when you lose essentially the songwriting force behind the band, it's bound to happen. So it now would be the time to kind of take that next leap as opposed to just a step in another direction. So I look forward to that. I was going to let you get into it at the end, but when can we expect the album to, be released?
That's something I can't talk about yet. We're signed under Prosthetic Records. What I can say is that the album will be out this year. And what I can say is that, people who follow us on Patreon will be getting hints earlier and with more depth than the general public. So I hate to be a cock tease, but if you want more, then go follow us on Patreon. Judicator.
Love it.
Metal. Yeah.
Love it. I look forward to that. Yeah.
It's a funny thing about the metal listening community is that there's like, I feel like 50% of them are going to just be pissed off that something doesn't sound the way that it used to, and then the other 50% are going to be like, holy crap, I love jazz and blues and different types of elements. Because when you think about it, metal has so much depth. It's one of the broadest genres of music because there's so many types of it, and there's so many influences, and there's classical influence, and there's jazz influence, blues influence, rock influence. It makes me laugh that some of the fan base can sometimes be so close-minded about what something is supposed to sound like. I'm the type of person who I look forward to something having a different flavor. I mean, hell, one of my favorite albums of all time is Chameleon by Helloween. So, doing something different is not necessarily a bad thing by any stretch. And, you know, Helloween's done just fine since Pink Bubbles Go Ape and Chameleon came out. So, you know, I say, all the power to you. So that's exciting. But, getting back to the album at hand, you know, unfortunately, what we came to learn in reviewing this album is that conceptually it has a lot to do with the death of your brother, and to that we send out our sincerest regards, and sorry for your loss. But what came from that is something that I think is really really like artistically beautiful. So as much as you feel comfortable talking about, kind of what happened and how it inspired you lyrically and musically, and how like the thematic elements of this album came together through that tragedy.
Yeah. I'm not shy about talking about it. This happened when I was 18, and we wrote this album when I was 24 or 23. Yeah, so I mean, we didn't really have a strong idea of what we were all about, Judicator, at the time. We had produced King of Rome and Sleepy Plesso, but I think it was just kind of following the natural progression that these two albums happened to be historical concept albums. So as we moved into At the Expense of Humanity, or what would become that album, there were no sort of expectations that we produce mostly historical albums. So I was like, man, I don't want to be pegged as a historical band necessarily. So I started coming up with this original story, and it was kind of like the Hellraiser movies. Because the music that Alicia had produced the music that Alicia had produced for this album was so melancholic and moody. And so, my mind first went to this set of ideas, and it, like I said, felt kind of like Hellraiser. But as time went on, and as I developed that story, and I did develop, like I had the song titles, I had started on lyrics, but it just didn't feel right. It just didn't feel, I don't know. It just didn't feel right. So I don't know how I got the idea. I mean, when I go to write lyrics, talking about headspace and being in the right mood or whatever, I have to separate myself for like at least an hour at a time if I'm going to work on lyrics. So I'll, whether it's lock myself in a room or go for a drive and do it on my laptop. This time I was doing it at the library. And the idea just came to me because there were things about the series of events. There were things about my brother dying that I had not really grappled with, that I had not really processed. And I don't know what, I think it was God's Failures, that first track. And I just had the idea. I don't know. It just, whether it came to me or through me or from me, but I just ended up pursuing that idea. I thought, wow, this is something that not only, to my knowledge, I don't think it's ever been done. That kind of a concept album. I could be wrong, but I don't know if that's ever been done. But on top of that, I was like, man, I am, I was learning things about myself and the situation, because there was so much that I'd swept under the rug. So I think it was, for me personally, just a very valuable experience as, processing and working through what happened. And I'm glad that it went that way because, not that my original concept wouldn't have been fun. It would have been fun and it would have been neat and it would have fit with the music, but it certainly, I do not think would have been as impactful of an album. And it especially, like, it gets me emotional sometimes, because people sometimes will get messages or comments about people who have gone through their own experiences. I just had a guy, you guys did your podcast on this, and we posted it on Facebook, and I'm not going to name names, but this guy shared that his little boy died and he was listening to the album, like, and I didn't have a conversation with him. I don't know what his experience or relationship to the album was, but he had positive things to say. And, you know, I've gotten those comments and messages periodically ever since the album was released. And so it means the world to me that this album still has relevance. And I think that's because it's something that everybody is going to be touched by in one way or another at some point in their life. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be cancer. It could be, you know, whatever, any number of horrible ailments that we or our family goes through. But, you know, I've heard that this album is a bummer to listen to. You know, fair enough. You know, it's not an album that you want to listen to unless you're in the mood for it, for sure. But, you know, it has its place. And like I was saying earlier, you know, you put on the Candles and you listen to Triptykon, or you go listen to, you know, Depeche Mode when it's raining. You know, I don't know what you would do for At the Expense of Humanity, but I think there's a place for it in your discography.
Yeah. You know, you're so right. And people actually reached out to us with the same, I guess, emotion behind the album and the lyrics, because once I had listened to the album a number of times, that's when I started doing, you know, my research and kind of learning a little bit about the band and what was going on at the time. So obviously I wasn't prepared, I guess, with the first listen or two until I really kind of dove deep into it. But even the comments on your Bandcamp page, I mean, it's clear that this just resonated with people at a level that was unlike anything that you had done before, and quite frankly, unlike many bands ever achieve, because it was operating at a whole different level, you know, as compared to most. Because not that there isn't thought put into lyrics, I'm not saying that at all. But what I am saying is that this is particularly thoughtful and something that resonates with everyone at some point in their lives.
Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, I don't want to put myself on a pedestal. I'm proud of what I do. I put a lot of work into what I do. So don't take any of this as like I'm high and mighty or anything, but I've put a lot more effort into my lyrics than what a lot of other vocalists do, I think. And I have been a big fan of a lot of bands that have lyrics that are really, I don't know how much thought went into them.
Yeah.
The one example that I'll bring up, just because it was something that I noticed, it was like, man, I love the band Gravedigger, but there was a time where I was listening to them and I'm like, I don't know, I don't want to say negative things, but
yeah, so I'm like, listen, I get it. We've all been there where the music can be fantastic, can enjoy the songs, but you stop and you kind of pause and you realize that there's not a lot of depth behind the spoken parts or the parts that are being, sung over the music. And to me, and I speak for myself, it actually takes me out of certain albums, even albums that I may have loved 10 or 15 years ago, just because I just cannot relate to some of the concepts or lack thereof in certain cases that's going on. So to me, the better albums or the best albums are the ones where it's that perfect marriage between the concepts, the lyrical concepts or the lyrical themes, combined with obviously that music, which is either melodic or catchy or serves whatever purpose it's trying to come across to the listener.
Yeah. And on the other end of things, it's like with our album, Let There Be Nothing, that album's approach, well, so The Last Emperor was an album where it was like, let's keep it fast and brisk and fun and, it talks about some heavy stuff in that album, but the approach is more like, hell yeah,
Right.
And so with Let There Be Nothing, we wanted to take the approach where it's like, let's just sit back and wherever the song goes, it goes. And so there's longer songs. And what I wanted to do with that album is, because there were 8 tracks, I wanted to fit the album into an 8-act story structure, which is another thing that I don't think anybody has ever done. The 8-act story structure for film, that is. But so that being said, it's like, okay, I wanted to put the movie of Belisarius to music. And how do you do that with like an A-B, like repeating verses or pre-choruses? Like if you have a standard song, you have a verse 1, pre-chorus, chorus, verse 2, pre-chorus, chorus, bridge, and then chorus and maybe an outro. So you have verse 1, verse 2, pre-chorus, chorus, and maybe the bridge, and everything else repeats. So you can't communicate a lot of information with that. So, Let There Be Nothing really goes all in with not a lot of repetition lyrically. And that's been criticized a little bit, and fair enough. It's again, Let There Be Nothing is a very particular kind of album. It's not for everybody. But so that being said, all of this being said is, there's a time for Let There Be Nothing. There's a time for At the Expense of Humanity. There's a time for butt rock. There's a time for the hokey pokey. Yeah. You can't eat at Ruth's Chris Steakhouse every night. Sometimes you got to have meatloaf and mashed potatoes or a cheeseburger. There's nothing against any of that. It's just, you can't be super high-minded all the time, So I realize there's a place for everything. And in our case, that tends to be on an album per album basis as opposed to a song by song basis.
That's one of the things we actually often talk about on the show. It's at least with me especially, I cannot listen to the same genre, never mind the same artist, but I can't listen to the same genre more than 1 or 2 albums in a row because I just lose focus and I'm not into it like I otherwise would be. So when I wind up going from, like I said, prog rock to black metal to power metal to jazz to classic. I mean, I bounce around all to Green Day. I mean, I'll bounce around all over the place. But I think by bouncing around, it makes certain elements of these albums really pop for me. And I think that it's that variety, which really, I think, also helps the better albums kind of rise to the top, if you will, just because when they stand out in that kind of a variety, it's usually because there's something special going on. And at least that's how kind of my approach to listening. But I wanted to ask specifically when it came to At the Expense, and perhaps just in general with your songwriting, or I should say your lyrics, when you have a piece of music and you're writing lyrics, obviously that go along with a certain composition, one of the things that I found to be exceptional on this album was your ability to kind of use your voice as another instrument. It wasn't just there, but it was almost like your voice as an instrument, or at least that's how I heard it. Did you write the lyrics kind of with your voice in mind as an instrument? Because some of your phrasing, Cannibalistic Mind comes to the forefront, and that song really popped for me just because of your phrasing during those choruses. I loved it. And the reason I asked the question is I just wanted to know, is that something that, I mean, I know that you didn't write the music per se, but I would think that you had some influence there just in terms of the recording process, because I can't imagine that was written for you. I feel like you had to inject your own tweaks to the music that was presented, I guess is my point.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up Cannibalistic Mind. I think of that, "You're fading away."
Yeah. It's, I mean, there's and stuff like that permeates the entire album. But to me, it's just so remarkable, or I guess is a word I would use, or another word that I would use is just so noteworthy that, like, there's your thumbprint is clearly on this, and I just wanted to know if it was something that like was a conscious decision, or if you were just presented with this, masterpiece, then you just kind of had to stamp your 2 cents on.
Not to be fancy pants or pretentious or anything, but I don't like it was lightning in a bottle. I think there wasn't a lot of methodical thinking on my part. It was just really following what I wanted to express first and foremost, and then what I think the song called for. And I think that is such a fantastic album. I mean, you said that it was a masterpiece, like even before I came on, and I agree. Like that album, it struck the balance musically on its own. So many, I forget what I was saying. It was great.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I love using my voice as an instrument or in unorthodox ways. I mean, that harsh vocal section that I made fun of in Cannibalistic Mind, I was starting to get into Protest the Hero, and I was like, how do you do that? I think it's called a fry scream, and I've played around with it. I haven't mastered it. I'm hoping to. I just need to dedicate the time and effort, but I was trying my hand at doing something like that, and so good on him. Carlos Alvarez, our engineer for that album, he managed to make what I produced sound good.
It's sonically, it sounds fantastic. Do you have any favorite tracks that kind of resonate with you, or tracks that you look back are like kind of your favorites as you I mean, we're not going back that far, but you have a third album that's coming out since then, this year. But what tracks just jump out at you at this point that you say, wow, we really kind of hit it out of the park with this one?
My favorites, I would say, are My Fantasy Destroyed, Lucid Nightmare, and Nemesis Fratricide. My Fantasy Destroyed, just because that was the first time that I was presented with music that I didn't have an easy answer to, in terms of like, what the hell am I going to do with this? That verse, I'm like, I had to work on that. A lot of the times when it's like it's like, okay, you can be like, hey man, you go, and it's like, it comes to you fairly easy because it's a fairly straightforward riff. But I don't know, that verse, those verses in My Fantasy Destroyed were challenging, and I'm very happy with how it came out. It's very unorthodox. Like, when I think of the song, I'm like, how does the chorus go again? Oh, yeah. But I immediately think of the verses. And the beep, bop, boo, hit a papita, booty, boo, boo, boo. It's definitely an unorthodox song. Lucid Nightmare, I'm just incredibly happy with, because this is one that had a lot of thought put into it musically, but also lyrically, and with the vocal arrangements. Working with Paul Black, who I don't know what he's doing these days. He's not on Facebook anymore, but he was in a black metal band called Turned to Stone. So look that up if you're really curious and you enjoy his work on At the Expense of Humanity. But that like, why do, buddly do, do, duddly do, like that was so much fun to arrange and to see come together. And Nemesis Fratricide, I just loved how this is the first time I think that we consciously integrated a callback, like a self-conscious wink and a nod, with that last part where it's like, pass the light, remember the fallen. Oh no, that's How Long Can You Live Forever. We do two nods, but this allusion to King of Rome. Nemesis Fratricide also has that vicious main riff that I love.
Yes. Yeah. Great answer. And I hope that as you guys, kind of get on the road again, that you'll keep some of this stuff in the set list, because I know that people are kind of clamoring to hear some of this stuff live, myself included. So we look forward to that. As we kind of, I guess, look ahead, what else can we, expect from, your work and obviously the band itself? What does the future hold?
We have finished this new album that is going to come out sometime this year. And we're exceptionally happy with that. I have not ever been so involved with the production of an album. So if anything, I'm just really happy that it came out so good, despite how incredibly difficult it was. It's the hardest experience I've had producing an album because it's the first time I've been in the driver's seat. But yeah, so really, I mean, this year we're focusing on releasing the album. We want to produce a couple of music videos for the album here in a month or two. We put a lot of effort into our Patreon, and we're going to continue putting effort into our Patreon. So, shameless plug, definitely check us out. Look us up on Patreon if you have to, patreon.com/judicatormetal. But yeah, so there's that. We're really just trying to establish what would you say? Like a foundation for the band, because we want to turn this into a small business as best we can. We're tired of seeing the red. We want to see the black on our accounting books. Sure. So we're working on ways to turn this into more of a viable small business because, why suffer for your art if you don't have to? If you can have your cake and eat it too, why not? So that's where our focus is right now. In terms of next year, we definitely have plans to hit the West Coast of the United States. But I'll tell you, it has been so many years that we've had people from the East Coast saying, please, when? And we keep saying, don't worry, it'll be soon. Don't worry, it'll be soon. And the can keeps getting kicked down the road. So what I will say is that there is a performance next year that we are committed to, which will, us touring to that location and back just makes sense. So we're going to be doing at least a 1 week little run to and from that show. So people on the West Coast will have an opportunity to see us live. But after that, we owe Prosthetic another album before the end of the year. So 2024 will be the next Judicator album. But all of this being said is that after we finish that little tour run that I'm talking about, East Coast is in the target sites. There's no more talking about it. There's no more kicking the can down the road. It's put up or shut up. We got to do it. So I'll just say that the East Coast is high on our list. If I'm being conservative, and conservative is generally where things end up falling, I would say 2024. I would say spam and petition metal festivals on the East Coast, or at least in the Midwest, to get Judicator. Because if we have a festival offer or something like that, hey, you've got our attention, okay? And it doesn't make sense for us to just go out and play one festival show, We're going to lose our ass on that one.
Right.
So if we're going to do a festival, it makes more sense to tour out and then tour back. So if you want to get us there sooner, just be our minions and push the band. Spam, bug.
It goes a long way. We selfishly look forward to that, East Coast run, just because getting out to the West Coast a little difficult for us, but we can, we'll see where the dates fall. But it's been an absolute pleasure. I know that this, I'm sure talking about this particular album, because of the circumstances surrounding, the inspiration and everything, has got to be difficult. But we appreciate you opening up and kind of letting us, letting our listeners in on a little bit of what was going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, I'm really happy that you asked me. I'm very happy to have done it. And like I said, this is a special album, and I just hope that people can continue to resonate with it and get something out of it for years to come.
Yeah, in closing, I just would like to say that this is one of those albums that I think kind of this is going to be this interview is going to be our 88th episode that we've done. And some of the albums that we've discussed are really heady. Like, we think of The Edge by Eternity X, Operation Mindcrime. There's just these really deep, whether it's just a really great story or it's like, The Edge is just a lot of like really heady type stuff. And so is this album At the Expense of Humanity. And I think that those albums, I think, give us the most to talk about, because especially for us, we're not musicians and we've never pretended to be. So for us to talk about musical terminology and things like that, it's not really our forte, even though I used the musical terminology just now by saying forte. Please ignore that. Sometimes just things that are going to resonate more with us are probably going to be lyrical or thematic, just because that's something that we can wrap our heads around a little bit more than how somebody, can make an arpeggio happen on their guitar or make a drum fill happen or whatever. So, I mean, that's why I'm glad that this album was brought to our attention, because I think that instead of just saying like, hey, the guitars were good and the drums were good and the vocals were good, we have more to talk about, with a deeper meaning and an especially personal one in this case. So, I, for one, and I think Justin would echo this, we're going to be paying close attention to what Judicator has done in the past that we haven't listened to yet, and what they'll be doing in the future. And I'm excited to hear this new this next evolution of the band. So
yeah, I would say, well, first off, thank you so much for how thoughtful and attentive or whatever, like the attention and thought that you've put into everything. I appreciate it. This is a really pleasant kind of conversation. This is like the kind of conversation that I think is ideal for talking about this album. But I would say that the next album that we are going to be releasing this year is closest in theme and in musical style to At the Expense of Humanity. And there might just be a few connections conceptually. So if you wanted to have me back on after you guys have had time to ingest the new album, to process it or whatever, I would be curious to have your thoughts and see what thoughts you have, if any, about the new album and where it fits in this this whole broader conversation, or this whole like thematic landscape that we're inhabiting right now. So yeah,
that would be awesome. And I'd like to think that by that time we'll have a much bigger appreciation for the entire discography. I mean, I know Justin went back and listened to some of the other albums. I haven't had a chance to, but I plan on doing so. And then that way, we can speak as people who have a broad sense of everything the band's done from day one onto the newest album. So that would be great. We would love that.
Yeah, it's humbling. For you or anybody who's listening, I would say check out, because you're listening to this, you may want to check out At the Expense of Humanity first. If you do that, just understand not all of our music is that depressing. But after that, the next most palatable album is probably going to be The Last Emperor. And if you like that, then you'll probably have an appreciation for Let There Be Nothing. And then if you check out our first two albums. You can tell that we were a garage band at the time. We were not yet able financially or just technically to produce the kinds of albums that we have now. So just understand the first two albums were our starting out albums. Also, because I didn't want to forget, you brought up that this is the 88th episode. I just think that's funny. Me being the kind of nerdy, esoteric kind of person I am, I think, wow, 8 is my favorite number, and this is 88, so it's my favorite number times 2, and it's about probably the most impacting album of my life. So I think that this is quite serendipitous as well.
I love it.
I don't think we could. I don't think we could end it any better than that. That's beautiful. Thank you. Make our jobs easy.
Thank you, John, so much for the time. We look forward to having you back. Before the end of the year, once we've had a chance to digest the new masterpiece, and we wish you nothing but the best of luck and success going forward.
Likewise, Justin, Chris, thank you so much. This has been awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.